Hello, it's Victor Dedaj. I hope you're having an amazing day so far. Today, I want to go over chapter 1 of Napoleon Hill's classic book, Think and Grow Rich. And the chapter is called Thoughts Are Things. Hill starts by saying, truly, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that. When they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire for their translation into riches or other material objects. Hill starts by giving the example of Edward C. Barnes, who wanted a business association, a business partnership with Thomas Edison. Now, if you looked at his circumstance, you would think this guy would have no shot of getting a business partnership with Edison. He had no money. He looked like a tramp. He had trouble getting enough to pay for the railroad fare to visit Thomas Edison in his office in Orange, New Jersey. Hill says, one of the chief characteristics of Barnes's desire was that it was definite. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him. So the day eventually came where he got the money for the railroad fare and he presented himself to Thomas Edison. And he announced that he had come to go into business with Thomas Edison. And Edison said years later, he stood there before me looking like an ordinary tramp. But there was something in the expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he had come after. I had learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he is willing to stake his entire fortune on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he had made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded. And subsequent events proved that this was true. Now, in the beginning, Barnes did not get that partnership with Edison. Edison gave him a job in one of his offices at a very nominal wage. Now, many months passed by and nothing seemed to change. Now, at this point, some people would have given up. They would have said, oh well, what the hell? Nothing's going to change. Nothing will get better. I will never get that partnership with Edison, so I may as well give up and quit. But Barnes did not see things that way. He kept seeing himself in a partnership with Edison, and he knew eventually it would come to be true. Now, what wound up happening was that the opportunity came, although in a different form from what Barnes expected. Mr. Edison had just invented a new device called the Edison dictating machine, which he loved. Unfortunately, many of his salesmen did not like the machine. They thought it'd be hard to sell. People would not like buying it, and it would take a lot of great effort to sell it, and that it was not worth trying to sell this dictating machine. Barnes thought differently. He told Edison, I can sell this machine. And Edison let him sell it. And in fact, Barnes sold the machine so successfully that Edison gave him a contract to distribute and market it all over the nation. Out of that business association, Barnes made himself rich in money, but he did something infinitely greater. He proved that one may really think and grow rich. And Hill goes on to say, Barnes literally thought himself into a partnership with the great Edison. He thought himself into a fortune. He had nothing to start with, except the capacity to know what he wanted and the determination to stand by that desire until he realized it. And if you have that same determination and desire and that persistence that Edward C. Barnes had, you also can become very successful, even if you're not rich, even if you don't have a lot of money. Circumstances may seem a little dire to you. The circumstances seemed dire to Barnes, but he persisted. He had that burning desire. He saw himself as a business partner of Edison. If you can see yourself as successful, you can have the same kind of success that Mr. Barnes had. Hill goes on to say, one of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. And he goes on to share an example of R.U. Darby and his uncle, who was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went west to dig and grow rich. Darby's uncle had never heard that more gold has been mined from the thoughts of men than has ever been taken from the earth. His uncle staked the claim and went to work with a pick and a shovel. After weeks of labor, he was rewarded by the discovery of shining ore. And he needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface. So what he did was he quietly covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland, told his relatives and a few neighbors of the strike he had. They got together money for the needed machinery and had it shipped. The uncle of Darby went back to work the mine. Now, the first car of ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The returns proved that they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. And they figured a few more cars of the ore would clear their debts, and then finally they would be raking in huge profits. And down went the drills. Up went the hopes of Darby and his uncle. Unfortunately, something happened. And you know what? The vein of gold ore disappeared. They had come to the end of the rainbow. The pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on and on, trying to pick up the vein again, all to no avail. And finally, they decided to quit. They wound up selling the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train back home. Now, the junk man did not give up. He called in a mining engineer to look in the mine and did a little calculating. The engineer advised the junk man that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with fault lines. His calculations showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling. And this is exactly where it was found. As a result of that, the junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his loss many times over when he made the discovery that desire can be transmitted into gold. The discovery came to Darby after he went into the business of selling life insurance. Remembering that he had lost a huge fortune because he stopped 3 feet from the gold, Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work by the simple method of saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from the gold, but I never stopped because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance. And Darby wound up becoming a small group of men who sold over $1 million in life insurance annually. And he said he owed his stickability to the lesson he learned from his quitability in the gold mining business. So Darby made a mistake. He gave up 3 feet from the gold and he lost a lot of money as a result, but he learned the lesson. So when he became a life insurance salesman, he did not quit like he did in mining for the gold. And as a result, he became one of the most successful life insurance salesmen in the country. So learn that very important lesson. You know, have that stickability, don't have the quitability, and you'll become more successful. And then he shares a story of a lesson of the uncle had a farm business, and a young black girl came up to him one day, and he looked at the child and barked at her roughly. He said, "What do you want?" And the child meekly replied, "My mommy said, send her 50 cents. The uncle retorted, "I will not do it. Now run on home." And the child said, "Yes, sir." And the uncle went on, continued working. And he was so busily engaged, he did not realize that the child had now left. And when he realized that she was still there standing, he yelled at her, "I told you, go on home. Now go or I'll take a switch to you." And the girl said, "Yes, sir." But she did not leave. The uncle, continued working, and he was about to pour some grain into the mill hopper, and he picked up a barrel stave and started toward the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness an assault. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. And when his uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quickly stepped up one step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, "My mommy's got to have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, dug into his pocket, and gave that girl the 50 cents. The child took the money and slowly backed toward the door, never taking her eyes off the man whom she had just conquered. After she had gone, the uncle sat down on a box and looked into the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping he had just taken. Now, Hill continues later on and says, after I had described to Mr. Darby the power unwittingly used by the little colored child over the boss, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that his success in that field was due in no small degree to the lesson he had learned from the child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her eyes glaring in defiance, and I said to myself, I gotta make this sale. The better portion of all sales I have made were after people had said no. He was inspired by the action of that little child who wanted to get the 50 cents from her mammy. And even though the uncle kept saying no, no, she said, she stayed there, she did not leave. Eventually she said, my mammy's got to have that 50 cents. And eventually he gave it to her. So he learned a very important lesson of persistence from that little girl. And Hill goes on to say, he recalled too his mistake in having stopped only 3 feet from gold. But he said, that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on, no matter how hard the going may be, a lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. So again, the lesson is keep on keeping on, persevere, don't quit, because if you quit, you actually may wind up quitting 3 feet from the goal, and you do not want to do that. And then he goes on to share one more story of Henry Ford and the impossible Ford V8 motor. One day, Henry Ford decides to produce his famous V8 motor. He chose to build an engine with the entire 8 cylinders cast in one block and instructed his engineers to produce a design for the engine. The design was placed on paper, but the engineers agreed to a man that it was simply impossible to do so. Ford said, produce it anyway. They said, it is impossible. Go ahead, he commanded, and stay on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required. And the engineers went ahead because they knew if they didn't, they would be out of a job. So they tried for 6 months. He came by and asked them what happened. And they said, we can't do it. He said, keep on working, produce it. Another 6 months went by and still nothing happened. The engineers tried everything that they could, but they could not get it done. They said it was impossible. And he said, keep on. And it happened again and again. And finally, at the end of the year, Ford checked with his engineers. And again, they informed him they have found no way to carry out his orders. He said, go ahead. I want it and I will have it. And guess what? The workers, the engineers, they went ahead. And then as if by a stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. The Ford determination had won once more. He was able to get that V8 motor built and put at that one block. So what does this teach us? Very often impossibility is only impossible in our minds. If we really want to truly want to do something, succeed at something, make something happen, we got to have that determination to do it. And if we do it and not give up, we are capable of accomplishing so many great things, as we saw in this example with Henry Ford. And he concludes by saying, when Henley wrote the prophetic lines, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul, he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our souls, because we have the power to control our thoughts. He should have told us that our brains become magnetized with the dominating thoughts which we hold in our minds, and by means which no man is familiar. These magnets attract us to the forces, the peoples, the circumstances of life, which harmonize with the nature of our dominating thoughts. He should have told us that before we accumulate riches in great abundance, we must magnetize our mind with intense desire for riches, that we must become money conscious until the desire for money drives us to create definite plans for acquiring it. So your thoughts are very important. If you want to succeed, you need to have powerful money conscious thoughts. You have to have that burning desire. Our thoughts are very powerful. If you have negative, weak thoughts, it is going to be close to impossible to succeed in your life. You need to have this burning desire, the great, powerful, magnetic thoughts in your mind. You got to work on it day in and day out. And it has to become a burning desire. And it has to be, and these thoughts have to really be strong. And you need to be persistent in these thoughts. Realize that your circumstances do not determine where you wind up. It is the kind of thoughts that you have. And if you realize your thoughts are very powerful things, and you have very powerful thoughts and have that burning desire, you can have the success of an Edwin C. Barnes. you can have the success Henry Ford had with his V8 motor. Thoughts are very powerful things. And when you realize that, your life can change. So that is my summary of chapter 1 of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, Thoughts Are Things. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you got a lot of value out of this video, please subscribe to my channel below. This is Victor Dedaj signing off. Have yourself an amazing day. Take care.